Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of Meet la Prensa. We have a very special guest for you today. He's actually a return guest who has a bombshell piece in the Washington Post opinion page this week about the language that we're using to describe the immigration story that everyone's talking about at the border. Julio Ricardo Varela, editorial director for Futuro Media. Thank you for coming back to Meet la Prensa.
I'm ready to return guest. I love it.
I know, right? Friend of show.
I am officially a friend of show. Awesome.
So I guess, first of all, congratulations on an amazing piece. I think the first thing that I was really struck by was just how many outlets were listed sort of at in the first couple of graphs for using language that dehumanized immigrants at the border, turning them into more sort of like imagery akin to disasters and things like that. Now, the AP responded to you. To your inquiry into this story by Alan Fram. What's been the response since your Washington Post story broke and since you tweeted the actual memo that you got from the Associated Press?
Yeah, the response has actually been overwhelmingly positive, mostly from journalists, right? I've gotten private messages from people who cover the beat, thanking me, part of groups that are telling me, yes, this needed to get raised, and just general tweets from reporters, from immigrant rights groups, from
right-wing media.
Yeah, right-wing, but we can talk about it. But there's two reactions, right? There's, this is an opinion piece. I just want to make it super clear. I don't work for the Washington Post. I'm a guest opinion. These are my opinions. This has nothing to do with any of the journalists at the Washington Post. So there's been sort of these misreports that I work for the Washington Post and that the Washington Post has created some edict. No, I wrote an opinion piece and my editor published it. And I happened to reach out to the AP because, like I say in the piece, at Futuro Media, we have an Associated Press subscription. And last week, I saw so many things, the things that I wanted to publish for Latino Rebels, which is part of Futuro Media. And as the editor and publisher of Latino Rebels, I was kind of like, I can't publish it like this. So we added an editor's note. I told my contact at AP, who handles our account, we pay the AP, we're paying customers. And I basically said, who can I talk to at the AP? Because we have some questions on editorial choices being made. And I wanted to share our concerns as an organization. And my account person hooked me up with John, who's the vice president of editorial standards at the AP. I sent him a couple of emails. Then we talked on, then I told him that I was going to write a Washington Post opinion piece about this. And I'd love to get the Associated Press on record. He took my call on Tuesday. We had a really good conversation, all on the record. And he mentioned a memo, and I said, wow, there's a memo too. Is that going to be made public? Is that going to be put on the Post? Because they've done that in the past. And he's like, no, we're going to share it internally. I was like, can I have a copy of it on the record? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He was totally nice. There isn't no hidden agenda in here. And then I filed my piece on Thursday morning. I got the memo. The piece got published on Thursday afternoon, right before Biden's press conference. I got the memo on Wednesday. I shared it with my editor, and we published a couple of quotes. And since it was on the record, I thought it was important to share it via Twitter as well, because in all transparency, like this, I thought it was a very informative and very insightful memo. And if you were an immigration reporter or someone who had questions about these stories, or if you're a new journalist that is covering this beat, I thought, hey, it's the AP. It's like the gold standard of journalism. And I thought they brought, I thought the points were excellent, and I was doing a service. Obviously, it gets misrepresented by right-wing media like, Fox News and the New York Post. But, I'm not worried about it. I wrote a piece. I was happy that my editor at Washington Post Opinions, Eli Lopez, saw something here. And I can't, I don't really worry about what Fox News or the Post say, but happy to talk about that too.
Right. I mean, I think it's just the question would be then, if we say we aren't going to call the story at the border a crisis, and Fox News is going to whine about the Associated Press and the Washington Post their unwillingness, and this was actually in the story citing you and your Washington Post piece on foxnews.com, they called crisis the C word, you know. So if it's just going to go, I know, right? But if it's just going to go into, you know, the usual divide on the immigration issue and nobody's mind is going to get changed, how valuable are these exercises in wordplay? Is it just semantics, or is there like a deeper value toward, I mean, we talk about humanizing people, and in 2013, as you mentioned in your Washington Post piece, the AP removed the term illegal immigrant from their style guide, yet to this day, undocumented immigrants are still treated like garbage in this country. Just as, you know, you call them illegal, you call them undocumented, it doesn't change the fact that it's a caste that's completely unrepresented and is really in the same it's in a worse political boat nowadays, and in pretty much the same policy boat as before that word. So maybe, I mean, I guess the question might be, is this just semantics, and are there better uses of our effort, of our energies to actually change the situation, given that it's an opinion and not just a straight news story?
Right. I think there's a lot there. And I think, first of all, I think no journalist or anyone, you know, you can't have it all, right? I think this is a multifaceted way to look at a very complex issue, which, to be honest with you, has sort of been hijacked and has sort of been dehumanized since the days of Bill Clinton. You know, there's no other way. U.S. media views migrants as sort of this faceless number coming from the global South. So, you know, that train left the station a long time ago. You know, right. Lou Dobbs, you know, Rush Limbaugh, you know, their disciples, Stephen Miller, the new, and then also the anti-immigration lobby in DC. But what hasn't, and this is where I think it gets a little bit of a problem, because I never said in my piece, let's just be real, that people shouldn't use the word crisis. Okay.
Right.
Start there. And because if you need to read a piece, I had objections to the words breaching. Surge. Like that was an actual sentence in the Associated Press that said migrants were breaching the Mexican border. And that is not only factually inaccurate, it's just like, what is this, D-Day? You know what I'm saying? Right. Like, that was just, you know what I'm saying? So like, right. And words like surge or the surge, where I listed examples, and it wasn't just the AP, you know, it was NPR, it was NBC News, it was CBS News, it was ABC News. It was
the Washington Post.
It was the Washington Post. It was the Los Angeles Times. So people, you know, obviously I don't, you know, Fox News and the New York Post are going to take whatever they're going to take and run with it and kind of feed it into their readership and make, you know, so I think it's really important that the word crisis, that's not what the story's about, because I'll tell you right now, it's a humanitarian crisis, and I have no problem saying that. Right. So I think like that's important. I think me sharing the entire memo was also important for me as a journalist, because people are like, well, how'd you get this memo? I was like, I asked. And, you know, and here it is.
And you pay for the service.
And I pay, you know what I mean? It's like, I was totally transparent. And the fact that Fox News had to quote unquote verify if the memo was real, this just kind of shows like part of the problem. So I think your question is a good one, Pablo, but I needed to give it some context, because I do think already Fox News and the Post completely misrepresented what I said or my intention in sharing the memo with the AP. So with that said, yes, I mean, this is a complex issue. Journalists aren't going to, like, what they write is not going to solve what's happening, right? But I will say that U.S. media and even Spanish language media and English, you know, we do a really bad job in general to present what's happened over the 30 years of this immigration issue. It's been horrible, right? It's always seen very U.S. centric. It's always seen as, you know, these faceless individuals that have no humanity, no emotion. even when we ask them questions, like it's like, did Biden tell you to come here? I mean, those aren't even the questions to ask for. So my indictment is sort of a self-reflective look as to how piss poor the U.S. media has been in covering this issue for years. And it's very easy. It's very easy to just be like, well, this is a Fox News talking point, when many of the outlets that I listed and the AP, which actually does really good work, like this is Associated Press, but they started putting in terms that I would expect to see in a Breitbart or in, in a Daily Wire. And that's a problem in my eyes, because I think that dehumanization makes people less understanding of what the real debate is all about. You know what I'm saying? So like media is responsible not to solve, I don't think it's a semantics game. I think it's a bigger issue of how we perceive this border issue as Americans. And we missed the boat. I mean, it's been awful. And I just point to the fact that, Bill Clinton in 1996 and 1995 State of the Unions, I mean, Donald Trump could have said those, people don't even know that. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where and so this whole talk about the right telling that I'm censoring people and the woke culture and all, it's all bullshit. That is bullshit. But they got nothing else. They got nothing else. You know what I'm saying?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, Fox News has dropped the ball for years now, especially, Fox News has dropped the ball from the beginning on immigration, but it wasn't really like so much a thing, right? I mean, if you remember in 2010, Rupert Murdoch and Mayor Bloomberg launched an amnesty push, like a nonprofit amnesty push. And it was, to me, it was a shame at the time. And I guess this is where my question comes from, that we were putting so much energy into ending the I word that we weren't putting any energy into bringing Rupert Murdoch's properties on board with our policy positions. You know what I mean? So Fox News, if you remember Fox News Latino anyway, when it was still around, it ended the I word, right? But that didn't actually change anything about the internal, like, sort of culture and of xenophobia that goes far beyond, I think, just basic language. You know what I mean? But I guess, like, when we talk about the incendiary language that's being used, turning, like, orphans wandering out of the mist at the Rio Grande into a D-Day like scenario straight out of, like, Warzone 1 or Call of Duty. The opposite of that, or like the inverse of that, which seems to be what the AP memo implies will be the case from now on, is to use, and I quote from John, AP's editor at large, who you've been in communication with, that you would rather use neutral, unemotional language around the issue, which begs the question. Latinos are often told in newsrooms that, like, covering immigration shouldn't necessarily be our thing because we can't emotionally unattach ourselves from it. So as a group that gets often sidelined from the issue that we know best anyway, is it okay now for the AP to tell its Latino correspondents that they have to use language that doesn't accurately describe it doesn't necessarily accurately describe what's going on at the border through their own perspective? Like, if we tone it down to just unemotional language, does that really capture it as well? I mean, I know it's not as bad as having the kind of language that makes us look like, invading hordes. But at the same time, the worrisome is if you use neutral, unemotional language, is anybody going to read it? And B, does it accurately reflect what's going on in an extremely emotional environment at the border?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. First of all, I think AP's Latino journalists aren't the problem. They've actually, if you know what I'm saying? We've had this subscription at Futuro Media through Latino Rebels and Latino USA for close to 2 years now. And we're able to produce and publish AP stories that relate to Latin America, to immigration, to Latinos, to race and identity. And then they give us the opportunity, and then I can also report the fact that, if Biden wins the presidency, I can cover it, right? You know what I mean? So I don't have to hire. So, and then because I know a lot of the Latino journalists, and there are a couple at the Associated Press, it's not like 2 or 3, and they're Latin, and even the Latin American, like, journalists, like, out of Central America and Mexico, they're actually not the problem. They actually do humanize it in a lot of ways if you really follow their work, and I've been really lucky to. So, and people like Noman Merchant and Elliot out of San Diego, they're amazing immigration reporters. They're not the problem because I've read their work You know what I'm saying? So what happened, I think, in the last, when I was starting to analyze and look at like what these U.S. media outlets were doing and the AP in specific, because I had access, because I was trying to publish, because this was the biggest story of the week. And I had access to these immigration stories as editor at Latino Rebels. I'm trying to cover it, right? Because I don't have the budget to send someone down to McAllen right now. Or I can hire a freelancer, but I don't have that correspondent. And I respect a lot of the AP's immigration reporters. But when I started seeing other articles, and the one that I mentioned about the breaching the wall, which was actually about Democrats signing an immigration bill, I think we started seeing very specific examples of that. And also the idea of a surge of migrants. Now, I can understand a surge of coronavirus cases or a surge of, numbers or whatever, a surge in prices. But when you start using words like surge, exactly. But when you start bringing like words like flow of migrants, surge of like this image, maybe it is because I'm a Latin American. You know what I'm saying? I see that. I've seen these images so many times of like, here they come, the migrants. And it was becoming so commonplace in a place like the Associated Press for that week that I kind of raised my hand and I said, we publish you and this is problematic to our audience. And they saw that, right? So I think it's really important to understand that news consumption in the United States is changing as well. And it's no longer, there's a lot of Latinos who actually read the Associated Press, because I know for a fact, because they come to our sites.
Right, in English and Spanish.
Right. And so like I told the Associated Press, and it was a really good conversation. And this is like journalist to journalist, editor saying, don't assume that everyone who reads you in this country is, this traditional white media consumer.
Right.
Your audience is changing, and some of these words are problematic in that context. Now it gets completely misrepresented because yes, it's so easy to take what I wrote and put it into the hopper of like left and right immigration controversy and Varela's the social, like I get that. I've been told that so many times. But one of the things, even when I was on Twitter, people were like, well, I hope you're criticizing Joe Biden. I'm like, you don't even know what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what planet are you on? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think anybody suspects you of having any sort of particular partisan bias one way or the other. You're just a man who looks for facts and puts them out there for public consumption when you think that they're newsworthy. And honestly, for over a decade now that I've been following you, your instincts have proven correct time and time again, not just when it comes to that news fact, but also critiquing the news industry that needs to be critiqued sometimes. And let's just say, shout out to the Associated Press, right, for having this conversation with you and for turning it around and getting it right. I guess like another big question or another big story that's coming out of the media sphere this week, or at least like the media reporting beat, has been this outcry amongst journalists for access to the DHS and HHS facilities that are housing housing these migrants who are coming across the border. My question is, do you think that being bilingual should be a requirement for reporters seeking access to those facilities? Is it appropriate to send somebody, and even more specifically, is it appropriate to send somebody, a reporter, into those facilities to tell the story who doesn't speak or understand Spanish?
What a great question. I think any news organization, first of all, everyone should be outraged about the non-access and what the Biden administration is doing, and the Trump administration has done it, and the Obama administration has done it. Like everyone, media access to these centers have been a thorn in several previous administrations. And here comes the Biden administration once again doing it. Now, if I were running a major news organization, I would be sending bilingual, like any bilingual correspondents that I know who understand the issue, right? And can be there and hear and listen as well. There's a reason why, as much as I did mention Spanish language media, I also as being part of the problem a little bit. They tend to sensationalize it too sometimes. But the one thing Spanish language media does really, really well is because of the language issue, is that they have access. They can talk to people. they can talk to a migrant family, and they don't have to worry about translation. That's why Cecilia Vega, that's Univision, but then Cecilia Vega of ABC News, who is bilingual, was able to go cover a story for ABC News, talk to a young man, a child, right? That then she brought the question to President Biden. So I do think, Pablo, that if you're a publisher or the head of a large news organization, and I'm talking, all the top ones, all the ones that I listed in that piece I wrote for the Post, in 2021, if you're not sending bilingual correspondence to those areas, then you're doing your readers and your listeners and the people that consume your media a major disservice in accurately portraying what these voices are saying. Because what's happened is, with anything, you're only getting like the government's view, right? These migrants have no voice. And, I work for Maria Hinojosa. If there's one thing that I do,
shout out Maria, the legend.
To my boss and La Jefa, she's the first person that tells you every time. It's like, we've already heard the government voices. Let's talk to the people that aren't getting the opportunity. And that's sort of what drives us.
Let me ask you about those government sources real quick. So this week, another really contentious point in the immigration coverage sphere has been about the DHS data, which, according to Secretary Mayorkas, indicates a 20-year high in border crossings, or at least in apprehensions. Should we trust DHS data, given the agency's history of lying, like blatantly lying to the press, to the public, A, and B?
Yeah. I'm already answering your first question by laughing.
And B, if not, what other source is there for information that could quantify the reality of the border? Like, how could we fact check that the DHS numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I do think everyone should be critical of anything government gives you in this issue, because there's a history. And I know there's like a new Democratic leadership, but, there was problems under Obama with data reporting and what was the detention and how long were kids and families held. So that's an issue. Now, do I think that people like Mayorkas are trying? Yeah, I do. I mean, he has a good reputation in the immigrant rights community with immigration lawyers. I think he tries, but I also think it's like, you're still heading up DHS, right? You're not, you're reporting to, you're reporting to the U.S. government. So right. I think you have to look
somebody who's going to be appearing before Congress soon, hat in hand, to ask for money. And the question that I've had about what the future of the Biden presidency is going to look like, a key indicator, is whether or not he grows ICE. If he grows ICE, if he grows the deportation machine, if he makes a funding request, because in the past it seemed like Democrats and Republicans have really aligned along the idea of writing ICE in essentially a blank check, like whatever they want or whatever they ask for, they get. There's not really a whole lot of negotiation there. So there's a big question kind of lingering over the next spending bill over whether or not Mayorkas is going to request the funds that would either continue or grow Donald Trump's deportation machine, right? Which obviously began in previous presidents. You mentioned before, too, the difference in access that Spanish language press has versus sort of the English language press in the context of requesting access to these facilities run by the U.S. government for detaining migrants. An organization that has access to both the Spanish and the English language press, of course, is the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, which is the oldest and largest, as far as I know, advocacy organization for, Latino news people like us, you know what I mean? So my question is, you cited in your Washington Post piece the memo that they put out with basically style guides for dealing with a style guidance for dealing with these migrant stories. What do you think is a better use of their resources? Because apparently they can't have it both ways. Is it doing these style guide considerations and hoping they get picked up, or doing the hard accountability work that gets Latinos hired and promoted?
I think it's both. I mean, I think it's both.
To them, they basically say they can't do one or the other. It's an organization with limited resources.
I mean, and I'll be
they have volunteers.
Let me.
Where should their focus be?
Yeah, no, I'm a full, and I'll be full disclosure, I'm a lifetime member of NAHJ. So, you know, I'm not, there's nothing I haven't told NAHJ that I'm going to tell you right now. I do think that there has to be more advocacy and real action in trying to impact change across major news outlets, right? I do think you get into a problem when you have these major news outlets sponsoring your organization. So, you know, that's a problem.
So
that it's always
you don't
has
think
been.
that the NAHJ should take money from news companies?
Well, I mean,
can you go to MSNBC
no, but if you
with
do,
two asks? Can you go to them for an ask for $50,000 for your national conference and then also criticize the hell out of them when you don't see any Latinos on air? Like, are they going to take you seriously, or are they just going to write you another check? Because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to sponsor a national conference than it is to hire a Latino.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We're a checklist item. Right. You know, and I think like the current model is not really pushing like true advocacy and impact and change. And what I'm telling you is not anything that I haven't told colleagues who are also members. I do think there's, you know, so there's nothing here. I'm not hiding anything. I mean, I actually think NAHJ is good for a lot of things. One of the things that I'm really proud of is, you know, I'll give memberships to young students, like student journalists, to do it for a year so they can network. And so I think there's certain things that really are good. I think it's very important in terms of trying to call out media and being really strategic about that. And, you know, I just look at the record that I've, you know, when I was under Latino Rebels, like I was one of the people doing it that I would elevate it to NAHJ. And I'm like, you guys need to write a statement about this. This is bullshit. So I let my record speak for itself because I've always been consistent about that. Right. I do think there's a problem in this, that it has yet to be solved, the right strategy for this. And this is where I get to the point of like, if I had time, and I might have time in a couple of years to reconsider what I want to do as a professional, you know, I think the biggest, you know, I still have my full-time job at Futuro, but I think the biggest problem is we still don't know how to communicate as Latino journalists to large news organizations. And we're still seen as like a checklist item. We're not good enough. We're being pains in the asses. We're angry. And the other problem is and this is not for anyone, because there are plenty of people in high positions, talent. I mean, I think about, you know, Jose Diaz-Balart, for example. I mentioned Cecilia Vega. They don't forget where they come from. I mean, they're the type of people who try to help young journalists and try to impact change. So I think there's a lot of advocates within organizations. You know, I think of Maria Elena Salinas at CBS News. I think of, you know, even someone like Ed O'Keefe, who's at CBS News. You know, I think of, there's a lot of examples. There's really, really good people who are helping. So I don't want to create this impression that there's no helping out there. But I do think we're
definitely going to ask you for the underrated at the end of this interview. Shout out Diaz-Balart, Jose Diaz-Balart, shout out Maria Elena Salinas, shout out Cecilia Vega, and shout out to the homie Ed.
But they get mentioned. But I think like,
but you know what they all have in common? They're broadcasters. So your piece in the Washington Post deals more with print and the language that we maybe see in the teleprompter, but not necessarily like the same. It's not exactly the same. It wouldn't necessarily be the same style guide considerations as broadcasters. So what would you like to see this week on the border story, which is sure to continue? What would you like to see broadcast media do differently?
All right, before because I'll do that, but I just want to make my final point about NAHJ. Make sure, because as a lifetime member, like I am a paying customer. So so
fair.
So I just want to make sure it's like any position that I make about it is very simple. I do think there's still a major problem when you're getting money from large news organizations to sponsor a conference and you're getting really nothing in return. And we have to have more serious conversations and be a little bit more, I wouldn't even say demanding. I think we have more leverage than we think. And that's a big problem that we have yet to tackle. And I think you start seeing examples of it, but it's nowhere near close. But do I think NAHJ does a good job in other areas like training and mentoring and connecting? Yes, because I have examples of young journalists who I've helped out, even with a membership. I paid for their membership, or I've helped them like try to get a job. And that, so there's certain things that, but we do have to have that bigger sort of, uncomfortable conversation about like, how do you impact change? So I just want to make sure you got that. Then on the broadcast side, I do think it's starting to happen a little bit, but it's still very parachutey. I have seen examples of a little bit more of like, oh, who are the people who are here? Who are the people who are fleeing the global South, escaping, or who are the refugees? Like, start thinking, words like refugees could be used. That's important, but what is still missing are local voices that have a long history of context and understanding of what is really happening. And I do think, I don't think a place like ABC News needs to go to the border, like reporting from El Paso, and just have people who are not from El Paso there. You know what I mean? It's like,
unfortunately, the next illogical step in the reporting sequence becomes Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and these other people who are totally xenophobic, becoming the correspondents that America's watching within the reeds of the Rio Grande kind of thing,
which is all bullshit. I'm sorry. The Ted Cruz live stream was ridiculous. Like, first of all, it's in the dark. Second of all, it sounded really peaceful. So I was like, have you ever been down there at night? You're like, wow, yeah, it sounds like the Rio Grande Valley. Like, what's up? And then he's like talking about go back to America. Like, what are you talking about, dude? You're just tossing things out. It's just too easy. Here's the thing. That is too easy. When you start tossing things out like all that, it's just too easy. And so I just hope from the broadcast side, push back. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're biased or anything. It's like push back on those assertions, because some of them are just BS. Anyway.
So Julio, last question. We asked you last time you were on here. You said Trucha, which I'd never heard of. Tina Vasquez, I think. And I remember the reporter from Politico. But who are the most underrated?
Bianca Padro Ocasio, you mentioned. The most underrated. Underrated what? Immigration reporters or?
Workers in the American newsroom, so it's broader than that. I think that we could focus this week on specifically the people who are working on that border story, though.
I mean, Cindy, was it who's in the LA Times who I love?
CARACAMO. Cindy CARAMACO.
CARACAMO. Yeah, Cindy CARACAMO is doing really good work. Got to read, front page of the, I'm in Boston. I'm so excited that they hired Jasmine Ulloa. And they're giving her the space to do deep pieces. And she wrote a great piece on the front page of the Boston Globe, top of the fold. I was like, wait a minute, is this my hometown paper? But she wrote a great piece about the immigration debate. Really good context, not sensationalized at all. Like very accurate, talks about, how people do what they need to do to get to where they need to get to, and into the border patrol stations. Really good. Yes, and she's amazing. Jasmine Ulloa, I'm so happy that she's writing for the Boston Globe. So those are my two hardworking immigration reporters that I really enjoy reading, and I'm really glad that they're doing what they're doing.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Meet La Prensa. Julio's story will be in the description below, so click on it, read it, share it with your friends, and mash that button to subscribe to us on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.